I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everybody to the regular Board of Trustees meeting. It's Tuesday, September the 14th, 2021, and we're glad everybody could make it here tonight. Let's all please stand and pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our heads for prayer, please. Our gracious Heavenly Father, please guide our thoughts and actions tonight to best lead our school district in a direction that pleases you. Bless our board members, administrators, teachers, and all other staff with wisdom and guidance that will best support every child in our district every day. Lord God, protect us all from COVID-19, and please reach out your healing hand to those who are sick or grieving. Please bless our community, our state, and our nation with peace and understanding in this very unsettled time. Thank you once again for the many blessings that you have provided us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Next up is approval of our agenda. Board members, you have the agenda, and without objection, we will approve it as submitted. Hearing no objection, the agenda is approved. Next is the approval of our minutes from our August the 10th, 2021 regular board meeting. Once again, you have those in front of you, and without any objection, we will approve those as well. Hearing no objections, the August 10th, 2021 meeting minutes are approved. Takes us to section 2, our consent items. First up is our financial report from Ms. Roden.
Hello, good evening. We'll start with the cash analysis statement you got in your packet. Everything there is pretty much on track. I'd like to point out that the federal revenue is up. That's the end of our fiscal year claims. We got that money in August. And pupil activity, student fees, that's the beginning of the year fees that the students pay, as well as $15,000 that we've received thus far for scoreboard sponsorship. That's reflected in that number as well. And on our revenues and expenditures, our revenues are $1.7 million and we've expended $2.4, but we have a fund balance to help cover that negative amount to carry us through. And I also wanted to let you all know that we closed on our ban issue, so we reimbursed ourselves from some of the funds we've been putting out for the projects ongoing. Do you have any specific questions?
I did have one.
Okay.
I was just looking at the difference in the Lexington County First Steps amount.
Yes, ma'am.
It was $24,000 for 2020 and 21 was $73,000.
Right. We are the fiscal agent for the Lexington County
Right.
First Steps, and then we have our own Lexington First Steps.
Right.
That 24 was Lexington 3's portion last year. They did not pay both portions, the secondary portion, till the next month. So there was a lag in that time.
So there was like, okay, so really the 2021 is more of the norm than this figure for the 2020.
Well, we actually get about $54,000 for first steps total for the year. The remainder is their employees. We're the fiscal agent. So we pay their salaries and fringes, and I claim them quarterly. So it's two separate buckets we're claiming from, but we list it there as like the lump sum for their portion and ours, just so we show the cash coming in.
Okay, and then I also looked at the house.
They did not build a house last year.
So we don't have one, but we did sell the one that was
Yes,
there.
ma'am. The last one is, yeah, and I think we did have someone contact us, but I think in the COVID, like our upcoming, I don't think we're ready to tackle that right now. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roden. Next is section 2.2, our superintendent's report. Dr. Atkinson.
All right, thank you. We've had a really good start to a new school year. I will say that the challenges of COVID have been much greater this year than last. We have had a lot more students than staff to test positive, and and a lot more students that needed to be quarantined, so that's posed some problems. But I just want to just thank all of our staff. They have really risen to the occasion and doing everything they can to make sure that our students are having as normal a school year as possible, and at the same time trying to keep everyone healthy and safe. Our nurses, our administrators have been pretty much dealing with COVID all day long as our teachers and staff have tried to carry on a normal classroom experience, and it's been quite a task with trying to trace everything, contact trace, and again just dealing with the issues this year. I just want to thank them all for the job they're doing to make sure that we can keep our doors open. I know we did, obviously had to shut the high school down and switch over to virtual for a few days, and they're back yesterday, and I will say that the high school numbers are the best they've been since we really started right now. I'm afraid to say that because, every time I said that last year, our numbers would go up. But right now, I think through this week, we've had 5 students at the high school that have to be quarantined, which is about 15 times less than some of the other weeks so far. So that's pretty significant. Our middle school, their numbers were creeping up pretty high, and they have started to level off and come back down. So we just hope and pray that will continue to be the case. I gave you a copy of our enrollment. Now, this is the enrollment for the last 4 years, and I try to do it at the same point in time. This is on the 10th day, so that we always comparing, apples to apples. And you can see that, our enrollment has gone up a little bit. Our enrollment for this year on day 10 is 1,948. That's 20 students more than last year. Our 4K enrollment is 97. That's up 18 students, but still below what it was 2 years ago. We still had some parents that are keeping their 4-year-olds at home due to COVID. Our largest increase was in 9th grade with 27 students. Our largest decrease was 3rd grade with 44 students. And if you take a look at last year's 2nd grade, you'll see there were 114 students in 2nd grade last year, which contributes to there only being 122 in 3rd grade this year. I want to recognize Colonel Robinson. Again, the awards and recognition for Colonel Robinson just keep rolling in, and we're so proud of him and Staff Sergeant Covington, First Sergeant Covington, for the work they're doing with our ROTC program. The U.S. Army Cadet Command manages 310,000 ROTC cadets across the U.S., 4 territories, and 4 countries. Colonel Robinson was selected as the United States Army Cadet Command Senior ROTC Instructor of the Year. So out of all the programs throughout the country and other countries, he was selected as the best. So we want to recognize him for that. This past week, the South Carolina Department of Education, they designated our district as a lighthouse district for personalized learning, or a model for others to take a look at. And next week there will be a statewide virtual meeting where the things that we're doing in our district to further personalized learning will be highlighted for other districts to be able to take a look at and try to get ideas to take back to their district. So we're proud of that. And again, I just want to say, reiterate the fact that our high school, our numbers have gone down. Just for reference, for so far this year, we have had, we have had 133 students test positive so far this year. Okay, 133 for this year. At this point last year, at the 4th week of school, we had 5. So there is a significant difference, and that kind of tells you the difference in the challenges last year and at this point this year. For last year alone, the total for last year for students was 137 for the entire year last year.
Wow.
And so we're 4 away from last year's total. So that kind of puts into perspective what our people are dealing with right now. Any questions on anything that I presented tonight?
Thank you, sir. It takes us to our public participation section. Do we have any cards? No cards, she says. Okay, section 4.0, our information items. First up is our Batesburg-Leesville High School project Mr. Carter, Mr. Cease, and Mr. Hughes, I think.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I appreciate you guys for allowing us to be here tonight. I think we have some good news for you. Exciting times as we're about to break ground. The image that you saw prior to was, of course, the exterior of the building, and we have there more of the ceremonial entrance for the public. However, the students will access through an enclosed walkway to the building. I'm just going to kind of point real quick. As far as spaces, just reordering you. We're showing this again because we did we had a collaborative area to save some money and pull that back in, still allowing good access to the school proper. However, we've got our spaces with the building science. We've got the welding, and then also the ag labs that will cover the top portion, the high bid area. And then we also have law and public safety. We've got a flex lab that will be utilized for different programs and flexible programs that the district may have, and then also health sciences. So that kind of generates and shows you the various areas that we have on this. And again, not a whole lot of changes there from last time we presented, with the exception of just saving some square footage on that one area. And I think that benefited us from a pricing standpoint. So speaking of pricing,
yes, well, thank y'all for having us tonight. If you recall, on July 13th, we presented Guaranteed Maximum Price number 1, which was for the foundation and site work for the Cape Center. Tonight, we're presenting Guaranteed Maximum Price number 2, which is the balance of the Cape Center. So this finishes out that bill. So before our original budget, that center number is what we're focusing on tonight, was $14,118. We presented on July 13th. We were estimating it to come in at $13,780. And we're pleased to say that we are at $13,541, which represents $577,000 under the original budget. So we're very satisfied with where we are. We've got good subcontractor participation. This project and the entire project, I think, has hit a real sweet spot with the subs. You know, they're needing work, so we've gotten a lot of participation. We're very pleased with where we are. So tonight, what we are presenting is a guaranteed maximum price number 2 in the amount of $9,717,714, which completes the Cape Center, and with board approval, that will actually tee us up for an August of 22 opening. And then at your next board member meeting, our plan is to present the guaranteed maximum price for the early site package and foundations for the front addition. And so we'll be prepared for that at that time. Hopefully we have the same positive results and this trend continues, but we're pleased where we are and just want to let you ask any questions you may have.
Is everything on schedule?
Yes, sir, on schedule.
On schedule?
Yeah, we're confident that August 22, this Cape Center will be in.
We're on schedule and under budget.
Yes, sir.
Best news we can hear.
That's what we like to deliver.
How's the supply chain?
You know, it changes every day. We opened from July 1st to August 11th. We got 11 COs on different schools around the states, and so we were able just to call audibles throughout the process. You know, sometimes you got to change materials when you find out something's not going to be available. So we stay ahead of it, stay in close communication with our suppliers, and they're good about telling us when there is a problem before it's too late. But there are no guarantees. It is a difficult situation right now, but we've been able to navigate it thus far.
Good.
Any other questions?
I do have
Yes, ma'am.
one. All of that is real good. Very excited to hear it. One thing, when you do begin with the construction, I was just wondering about the walkway from the current Cape building to the academic building. Is there some kind of plan as to?
Yes, ma'am.
what?
We've been working very closely with Sonia and her staff, and the Office of School Facilities has actually been out there. We're actually doing a changeover process with fire alarm to make sure everything's working safely and properly. So yes, the students will not be affected by our construction at all.
Will there be any kind of covered walkway for them to use from the Cape building to the academic building?
No, ma'am, just for temporary type
Yeah.
access, we just did not think that warranted, basically for 9 months, or actually less than that,
Yeah,
timeframe.
yeah.
So,
We can provide contract umbrellas. Happy to do that.
But they will be isolated because we've already worked to where the fencing will be placed so they can't
Yes.
get
Oh, yeah,
anywhere
they're-
close.
they're separated from any of the construction activities.
Okay.
Their safety is our utmost importance.
I'm sure.
And one thing we do, just so you all know, we tag all our employees with a sticker on their hard hat, so no one can just come in dressed like a construction worker. So they have to have, they're identified, they're all sled checked. So we go to extra lengths to make sure that everybody's safe. We've got proper employees on site.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So
I
we
knew
just-
you all had it covered, I was just curious.
Oh, yes, ma'am. That's
So we just
fine.
don't have the walkway during the construction period, but when it's finished, we will.
Oh, well, you'll be enclosed.
Yes, it'll be completely enclosed.
And climate control?
Yes.
Okay, let's quick pass now. So that corridor connects the existing building to the new.
This is currently your guidance wing. So
Right.
this quarter right here is enclosed, takes you right back to this building.
So it's part of the school now.
Good.
Yep.
Anything?
Okay, anything else?
I don't think so. Thank you very
y'all
much.
so much. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you
Have a
very
good
much.
evening.
Thank you.
Next up, Section 4.2, some of our board members are going to give some highlights on our 2021 South Carolina School Board Association Law Conference that we attended a couple weeks back. So, start on this side?
Start on this end.
You want to start?
Okay. I just want to say that one of the speakers at the meeting said to all the districts representatives sitting out there that sending your board members to these conferences is one of the best expenses that you can have, ways to use your money. And from the outside looking in, I might not would have always said that, but since I've been going, I will say we learn an awful lot at these conferences. And it really is an eye-opener. Two of the conference topics that I thought were very instrumental in increasing my knowledge were the first one was on the ESSER funds, and that is the money sent to us through the federal government over the last 3 years in basically coronavirus aid. And nationwide, it has amounted to about, correct me if I'm wrong, I added it up, I'm not the best at math sometimes, $190 billion nationwide. And there are 3 different acts, but the most important one that we're looking at right now, all the money, which is the third one, which is the American Rescue Plan, because you have to submit these plans to send this, to how you spend this money. So when you, on the first plan, the first amount of money that we had, we've already submitted the plan and it's already underway. That money has to be spent by September 30th, 2022. The second part of the money has to be spent by September 30th, 2023. So those plans have all been put in and they're in place. The last one is the American Rescue Plan, and that money has to be spent by September 30th, 2024. But one important facet of that is that 20% of that money has to be spent on learning loss. So that is a huge chunk of money that we can use to recoup some of what we lost academically for our students. But as always, the devil is in the details. They tell you that you can do a lot of things with this money, but when given the time frame and the requirements that they put on it, some of it makes what you want to do virtually impossible. So you just have to work within the guidelines. But it's all for COVID relief. The other session that I attended was the legal section. This was the general opening speaker, so everybody heard him. And he was the chief legal officer in Washington for the National School Boards Association. And the most important takeaway from this is that we as public school members and board members we have a very important and large voice in Washington with the legal offices of the NSBA. They are arguing before the Supreme Court. So he gave us several cases to watch. He discussed the topics that have been at the forefront of the cases, which is free speech and gender identity. And then we also learned about the Roberts course and how the balance on that course would affect the decisions they make. So I thought it was a very good conference.
Well, from my standpoint, I was very pleased with it. We had capped our participation to 300 board members, and we had 299, so I thought that was great. We did what we were supposed to. We social distanced. We wore a mask. So I was really happy with how it turned out, considering that the COVID and how it affected us. And as Sonia said, we heard so many comments about how good the topics were and how the speakers were. And the one that caught my eye was on Sunday morning when they talked about the new law and the State Accountability Act and dissolving school boards and taking over school boards. And you think that you're an underperforming school and that means that, oh, your school was failed, for so many years, they're going to come in and take over. It could be for any number of things. We had a Spartanburg 2 board member say that they had a CFO that retired, and simply because he did not put money in the proper areas, they were thrown on fiscal watch and put under suspect because they simply did not file things like they were supposed to. So you learn that it's not just because my school is failing. There's all kinds of things that they can come in and take over. It's a big concern, especially of the School Boards Association, of dissolving elected officials when the school board is the only elected official that can be supposedly with this act dissolved. Nobody else is held accountable, your town mayors, your councils, your legislatures. So it's a lot going on, and we feel like school board members have been kind of given the brunt or had all the blame placed on us. So it's very interesting that we are watching that to see how these provisos go through and how the fact that the superintendent of education can come in and just completely dissolve a board with no thought as far as who handles their finances, who does their hiring, who follows through. So it's a lot that has not been considered. That has a lot of us concerned as far as what does that do for districts and school boards when that happens. So that was my soapbox. I'm sorry.
I agree with you. That's an important one for sure.
As Sonia said, the sessions were just outstanding. They were filled with helpful and up-to-date information on the new and changing legal requirements. One of the breakout sessions that I attended was the Freedom of Information Act update, protecting employee privacy. And in this discussion, items that were included were the structure for maintenance of and access to personnel files, also the FOIA provisions most relevant to school districts, responding to records, requests, and meetings which may be closed were all discussed as well. During this conference, and we've talked about it, we've said that this is one of the best conferences. I know I'm fairly new on the board, but it is a very good conference, and I've heard other members say how much they gained from this conference, and I can vouch for that too now. It is just so much useful information shared. And also, I do want to say that our very own Ms. Cheryl Burgess, she did an outstanding job in her role as the president of the School Board Association. So I do want to just say she did a great job and represented us very well.
Thank you, Francis.
Okay. Janet? Okay. Takes us to our next section, 4.3, State Accountability and Report Card Update. Mr. Jeff Potts.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Dr. Atkinson, and Lexington 3 family. Typically this time of year I come up to share information about our end of the year state report cards and also to try to make sense of our report card rating. So if there's a really positive thing, there's no quiz tonight about how to actually calculate any of our report card ratings. That you don't have to worry about. There we go. So tonight's report is going to feel a little bit different. So instead of sharing information about how academic achievement and preparing for success deal specifically with our school ratings, you're going to hear something that is going to sound a little different. And that means you may have some questions at the end of this which you typically might not have in one of these normal presentations. I do want to say the 2020 school year ended without us not only having South Carolina assessments, but also ended without schools having a report card rating. In 2021, we had those assessments under very different circumstances or abnormal circumstances, and we didn't have a report card rating again for this year. So we're going a couple years without report card ratings themselves. I'm going to try to share some information with you tonight to synthesize as much as possible the information about our assessments and to give you as much information that you can digest and still make an interpretation. But I first want to share with you a couple cautions, specifically dealing with what the research says about learning loss. There has been a lot of reports about learning loss that you have probably some read yourself. And I do want to say that learning loss is something that has occurred for almost all of our students in ELA and math. So everybody to some degree has experienced this. And it isn't just through our assessment measures where you're going to find this. The Horace Mann Education Corporation indicated in the fall of 2020 that 97% of teachers and admin believe that their students have not just experienced some, but significant learning loss. And so not only do we see this learning loss in ELA and math, but you're also going to notice that in some cases, math is more consistently impacted by the learning loss of students. I know studies by NWEA, Curriculum Associates, and iReady have all indicated that students have a greater propensity to have greater learning loss in math than they do reading. And one of the other things that you're likely going to notice, and we may not have enough evidence statewide here to share it with it tonight, but I can assure you that this is true, that younger students, specifically our non-readers and early readers, are going to be heavily impacted by being out of school. The Stanford Graduate School of Education had a recent study also in the fall and found that students' development of their oral reading fluency basically stopped in the spring of 2020. And even though many of these students returned later in the fall back to school, many of these students didn't recoup the full losses that they had experienced from the spring. So even though despite our students returning in the fall of 2020, that brought its own issues into our school district and to those other school districts around the state. It's specifically the separation of students and teachers, sometimes based upon choice and sometimes based upon being forced upon by the virus. Beginning of the school year, we had almost a third of our students within the district that were registered for remote learning. By the end of the year, that number was down to only about 25%. And obviously that was something that looked different at every grade level, but I want to tell you that grade 3 had over 70 students that had registered virtual at the beginning of the year. And I share that with you because that's one of those kind of pivotal grade levels that we have where you're talking about students who are at the cusp of being readers or early readers and non-readers. And so it's a real pivotal year. My own daughter was in that part of that same grade level last year, and I can tell you just from my experience that I could tell some of the issues that she was having and had experienced from learning loss. One other major component really before we start diving into some of the assessment information, and that is there were some discrepancies that we noticed last year across the state within our testing. And most notably, as I saw a few weeks ago, about 1 in every 7 students across the state in public schools did not take a standardized assessment. So last year, even though the state still asked us to test all of our students, they didn't have the federal requirement for the number of students that we have to test was waived. So there were some districts that did not test all of their students. It looked different from district to district and school to school. I can assure you that we actually tested more students in 2021 than we did in 2019. And that's really only to be said about the hard work that our school test coordinators did to make sure that students came in to test. Calling on the phone. We had some students who were coming off airplanes and being dragged really into the school by Dr. Roberts to make sure that they tested. And that's actually a really good thing for end of course, because for students who are taking end of course, their scores don't just count for us today, but they count for us later on when we have other report card ratings. So I think we can all appreciate that. Many of these students who didn't test across the state were likely due to the fact that they were remote learners. So if they're experiencing some of the same things I was just talking about, they may be students across the state that may have had scores that didn't represent some of the highest degrees of work that we saw throughout the state. Some students didn't test some districts didn't test thousands of students, upwards of 33%. So I really just want to tell you that we really tried to do the best that we could to make sure all of our students tested. But one of the issues that presents, and I'm going to share with you, this is from the last time I shared this presentation like this 2 years ago. We were scoring, especially in elementary school, we were scoring above the state average in terms of the percent of students that were actually scoring meets or exceeds on SC Ready Math. And I share that to say that when we start looking at our information for this year, because of the large number of students that didn't take the assessments around the state, it's going to be harder for us to really determine how we measure and stack up. How do we measure against the state? How do we measure against other districts? Some of that is kind of thrown out the window. Not completely, but I think there are ways that we have to be able to say it's not apples to apples comparison with everyone. So I'll first start with just our graduation rate. And our graduation rate over the last 5 years has really been hovering between about 83% and 90%. We were really hoping that one of these years we're going to clip that 90% value. And the state has been hovering between about 84, 85%, and 81%. And so we are graduating more students than we would typically see at other schools around the state on average. I do want to share some of our end of course results. These are end of course results that were taken last year. These are not our cohort results that we would look at for report card ratings, but I do just want to share some of the scores themselves. Obviously, scores were recorded for 2017-18 school year, the 18-19 school year, and the state did not report any official results for the 19-20 school year. And then we have the 2020-2021 school year. A couple things you will notice: it's the first year of the English 2 end of course assessment, and so this is the first time that our students have really had an opportunity to take this examination. You will notice that not just for us, but across the state, we see a drop in performance for just about in every subject, according with the end of course exams. I'm going to shift a little bit to college readiness. This is a chart that I was creating over the last couple years. This deals specifically with the graduating cohort class. So when you see 2021 in the column, it's specifically looking at the students who graduated in 2021 compared to the prior 2 years. And a couple of highlights I just want to share on this page is I know our high school admin and guidance staff are doing a great job ensuring that we take advantage of opportunities to become completers and to help students participate in dual enrollment courses. And I think that's evidenced by this. A couple other things, you're going to see Asvab, which is the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery Test. It looks like it went down, but this is a self-selected examination, and students are only going to take this if they're actually going to, if they needed to pursue something after they graduate from high school. And in addition to that, I just wanted to share that work-based learning has been a challenge within the last year and a half, and I know that the high school has worked really hard to try to network with employers and to try to connect the dots for students who are between job seekers and the right position, but I think the challenge has been sending out students over the last year or so. So you're going to see a drop in the number of students or graduates participating in the work-based learning experience for 2021. Now, AP scores haven't yet been released by College Board, but I didn't get an opportunity to share with you the 2020 scores last year in person, so I'm just sharing with you what that looked like. I want to just address that I know virtual learning in AP courses specifically has been a challenge, not just for our students, but around the nation. And I really believe that some of the strict guidelines that exist for AP exam doesn't really account for some of the psychological impacts that students have taking remote learning. And so there have been a lot of challenges that students have had with that. Not just, I think ours have actually done okay with the administration of the test, but the remote learning part has been something that I think is difficult for many of these students who choose to take AP exams or AP courses and exams. Like the AP exam, SAT, College Board hasn't released this information yet, so I just want to share the information up to last year. I should say that SAT and the ACT scores for 2021, they're scheduled for release later this fall. Scores for the graduating classes for both of these have been impacted by virtual students' participation in the assessments, whether or not students are coming in, and also impacted by some of the universities are, telling students they don't need these college entrance exams for entry. So I know some students who may have had an opportunity to take one again may choose not to, and so I'm not sure to what degree that it impacts our kids, but I'm sure in some case that does. Likewise for ACT, it'll be released later this fall, but I wanted to share information from 2020's graduating class. And this 2020 graduating class was the first time that I have seen since I've been here that we outperformed the state average really in every subtest and in the composite test as well. And so I know that was something that when we initially saw the results from a couple years ago, we were really excited about this. And again, universities and colleges not mandating college entrance exams going to impact current students taking some of these exams. I'm going to pivot to elementary and middle schools, talk about SC Ready. I'm going to first talk about ELA. And so I've given you a couple years, 2017, 18, 19, and then 2021 to look at. This is the percent of students that are scoring meets or exceeds expectations on SC Ready. And you're going to notice in just about every case a drop from last year in elementary school. But one of the things that we start to notice, especially as students get a little bit older, is that mitigating factor of ELA isn't impacting students as much. In fact, if you look at fourth grade scores are actually higher than they were just a couple years ago, percent of students scoring meets or exceeds. It's the same thing is true in fifth grade. In sixth grade and eighth grade, you see something similar. So this is something that is identified within the research, that students who are younger in reading were having a bigger issue with learning loss than students who get a little bit older. Some of this kind of confirms that information for us. I want to share a side-by-side of the importance of face-to-face and virtual learning. And so I'm sharing the information still, percent of students scoring meets or exceeds expectations on SC Ready. Same group of students that were on the last set of slides for elementary school. Just what's the difference in face-to-face learning and virtual? And One of the things that we see is a third grade class that is scoring, it's scoring pretty low in terms of percent of students scoring meets or exceeds. Fourth grade, when you have face-to-face and virtual, there really isn't a whole lot of comparison. And there is even some discrepancies in fifth grade for ELA. I didn't provide 6th, 7th, and 8th, mostly because the start of the school year for middle school, they were on this hybrid schedule, so it's a little harder to parse out how much virtual and face-to-face or remote learning and face-to-face students had. I will share with you the same information, just percent of students in Lexington 3 versus South Carolina in ELA across 3rd through 8th grade, just so you can see those gaps. Again, I will remind you that it's hard to make comparisons with the South Carolina just because we don't have a complete population of all students around the state to really gauge where this looks like compared to what it was previously. For math, we're going to see a trend that looks a little different than it did for ELA. In 3rd, 4th, and 5th, you notice this kind of progressive performance scores that are generally going up across the years, and then you see the 2021 scores really take a dip. When you look at 6th through 8th grade, 6th through 8th grade is the same thing. Let me say that in 8th grade, we had a group of students that did not take SC Ready because they were also taking end-of-course math in 8th grade, and there was also an issue with quarantine in 8th grade, and we just couldn't get them all. And I think I just said, you know what, enough's enough for many of these students. I'll show you that same face-to-face versus virtual for math last year, and you can really see that there's a discrepancy between students who are performing face-to-face and virtual in math in our younger grade levels. Helps to really strengthen the idea that students are learning best when they're with us here in school. This is a comparisons, Lexington 3 versus South Carolina over the last year. And again, I'll make this statement, making comparisons against the state last year can be a challenge. Finally, I know we don't have a lot of scores for our primary school, but I do want to share this just because it goes in the importance of kindergarten readiness and readiness in general for reading. So I just shared with you 2019 and 2020 scores. Students last year at the beginning of the year were required to test in KRA at the beginning of the school year within the first 10 days. And the state essentially told us to waive the physical well-being and social foundations component of the assessment. But we can see that there was a drop in the fall of 2020 for our students in language and literacy and mathematics. And those are students right when they walk in that first day of kindergarten. So they don't have really time that they have spent with us prior to that unless they were with us in preschool, but their preschool year got cut short, many of those kids. So I know the purpose of our preschool is to make sure that students are ready for kindergarten, and that was a real challenge with this 2020 class. I told you I'd try to synthesize it as much as I could. I could have gone on much longer, but I do want to see if any of you have any questions, things that you would like to see, any performance that you need more information on.
I think I just need to absorb it all.
That's fair.
I was going to say that same thing. And also, as you were going over this, I was trying to look and tracking the students to see how they did. But I didn't do a very good job because I was trying to listen to you as well. But from what little bit I did review, I noticed the tracking of the students that we could tended to go down as well.
You're going to see that even if we were to report the same charts but with tracked cohorts. You're going to see very similar drops with groups of students, yes.
So obviously you presented that the remote learning and coming back is obviously presenting a problem, especially with the younger, students. But now they're coming back. So other than just putting them back face to face, which we're doing, I think, as good a job as we can right now, what would a a catch-up plan be to kind of get them back potentially to where they should be?
Yeah. I know one of the things Dr. Atkinson referenced right away was this personal learning and us being able to take students and really personalize instruction for them. I think even if when you personalize it for each individual student, that's really the best opportunity that we have to catch students up, to really focus on where they are. And so, I mean, one of the biggest components is just identifying where our students. And I know we have a lot of resources in our primary school and in our elementary school to really look at reading and specifically identify where students are at. Is it language development? Is it oral reading fluency? Is it vocabulary? And so they're working with our MTSS process and making sure that all of our students are really being identified who need extra support.
I know we have students within our intervention program. We have the MTSS, but then we have the interventionists too. And since we have Easter money that's supposed to be targeting learning loss, do we have any plans to add any interventionists?
I personally am not looking at those funds and identifying it, but
He just
that is
got
something
help.
He just has the number.
You got help.
I can address that. We have added 2 interventionists part-time. You'll maybe remember, I think it was the July meeting that we
Right,
had
at the middle
that I
school.
shared. We have 2 part-time folks that are coming on board at the middle school. We are not adding any positions for intervention at any of the other schools. What we are doing instead is routing some of that money into academic support beyond the school day. So I've met today actually with the elementary school. We actually have started the program at the primary school yesterday so that they can provide before school and after school support, and that will be through our own teachers. And that's an opportunity for them to earn some extra money because many of them enjoy that. And then as Mr. Potts said, we're using our MTSS structures at all 4 schools so that we can identify who needs help. And in addition to anybody that's getting Tier 2 or Tier 3 services during the school day, the teachers also know within their own classrooms those students who need that extra support during their regular ELA or math block in the time period at each school that's been designated for small group instruction too.
Well, and that support will go till the end of the year. We'll do that all year?
That support will go through 2024, as you mentioned, that you learned that we have that
Right,
funding
so we can
until
take that money and do it
2024.
all that time.
Yes, we have it budgeted for 2 years running.
Good.
Mr. Potts, will you be willing to come back and give us some updates, especially when we get those SAT scores later on this fall?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I think this is important for us to
Now,
hear from you more often.
Now, Mr. Potts talked about the fact that we tested more students in 2021 than we did in 2019, but he forgot to mention the fact that we had less students in 2021 and 2019. But I say all that to say he praised all of our administrators at the school for getting all these students into testing, but he didn't say that he was a part of that too, and he was bringing students up to the district office and getting those students in here and testing in his office as well. So he was a part of the fact that we were one of 3 districts that tested more than we had 2 years ago.
I forgot about that.
You forgot it. I did.
Is there something that we can look at, say, 6 months down the road to see if we're making progress in these without actually having to take the Ready test and everything over again?
Maybe one of the things.
To see if we're moving ahead and moving forward.
I know we just had a data team meeting last week, and I think one of the things we were talking about is assessments. So perhaps we can kind of convene as a team and talk about what would be those things that we would that we really think we could share and how we would share that with you.
Super, thank you.
Are we still MAP testing?
Yes, NWEA testing right now is mandated by the state, so they're actually requiring a percentage of students be tested, and so this is creating a similar challenge for us, making sure we get all students tested within a window. And so right now we're working on testing, and so we have those results as well. Yeah.
That might be good to share with us.
And that's some of the data that we'd probably be sharing in our data team meeting. So yeah, we can have a conversation about that.
Okay, good.
Thank you for making
I know.
sense of all that for us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Potts. Takes us to Section 5, our action items. The South Carolina School Board Association Annual Business Meeting is December the 4th, 2021, down in Charleston. We have to select a voting delegate and an alternate for that business meeting. In the past, we have typically selected officers for that voting delegate and alternate, but I don't think it has to be. Ms. Burgess is our vice, and she cannot because she's our president, so she'll be presiding over the meeting. So if anybody would, I'm going to be at the meeting, and I am willing to be the voting delegate. So if anybody would like to make any motions on who would like to be the...
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to select you as the annual delegate for the South Carolina School Board Association Annual Business Meeting on December 4th, and with Ms. Balknight as your alternate.
Ms. Balknight can accept that? Okay, I have a motion by Ms. Derrick that I be the voting delegate and Ms. Balknight be the alternate for the business meeting December the 4th, 2021. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second by Ms. Burgess. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor raise your right hand. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, next up, the National School Board Association Advocacy Institute on January 23rd through the 25th, 2022 is in Washington, D.C. this year, and any out-of-state travel has to be approved by the board. So,
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we have approval to send board members who are able and willing to go to the NSBA Advocacy Institute in Washington, January 23rd through 25th, 2022.
I have a motion by Ms. Burgess that we allow board members to attend the National School Board Association Advocacy Institute, January 23rd through the 25th, 2022, in Washington, D.C. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Balknight. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor raise your right hand. Motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we move into executive session for discussion of personnel matters.
Motion by Ms. Carey that we move into executive session for discussion of personnel matters. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Burgess. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor raise your right hand. Motion passes unanimously. We are in executive session.